Not,
you say, I'd like to coach you.
not fraps or something. Well, Paul has just shown me, since I talked about quotes on Monday, he showed me a book that he was reading that just happened to be a nice quote for our course. And so this is by Camus, The Plague. What? Okay. No, this is translated into English, but there's a story about this writer who's visiting his doctor, and he says, "What I really want, doctor, is this: on the day when the manuscript reaches the publisher, I want him to stand up after he's read it through, of course, and to say to the staff, 'Gentlemen, hats off.'" This is something like what I wanted when I was writing the Scientific American article. Okay, then he says, he was almost excruciating pains to bring it to perfection. Evenings, whole weeks spent on one word, just think, sometimes on a mere conjunction. I'd like you to understand, I grant you it's easy enough to choose between but and. It's a bit more difficult to decide between and then, but definitely the hardest thing may be to know whether one should put an and or leave it out. And I think that'll come up in discussion today too, probably somewhere in here. But anyway, opening phrase is giving me no end of trouble. And here's the, and he starts out with the beginning sentence, which is terrible. It's almost as bad as a dark and stormy night, but anyway, he was, all right, well, anyway, what do you think of it, doctor, and all this, and so it's only a rough draft. Oh, well, it looks like something I'd like to read the rest of. So, so I guess I should, this quarter I'm writing this book, Concrete Math, and I should probably describe to you some of the joys and sorrows associated with this, because I'm sort of filled with it all. And I had this great inspiration during the summer. I mean, I went to see I went to see Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and I came out of that movie and I said, boy, that's really an incredible work of art. Who could have conceived of doing that? In 1937, who could have conceived of doing such a project and carrying it through and getting it out and everything? And I said, boy, I would want to create a work of art like this. And in this book, Concrete Math, is going to have to be just a gem. But with one condition, however, and that is that I want to finish it in 3 months. I mean, I want to write the greatest possible work of art, except that I only got 3 months, because I really have many other things to do. So I'm not able to spend 3 months on a conjunction, in this book. But I was inspired anyway. I tried to do my best, but on the other hand, I know I have to crank out about 4 pages a day on the average. And I mean, that's average. That's every day, including Saturdays and Sundays. And so this meant not slacking off and keeping to a fairly rigid schedule. Still, I'm here. It is November already, and I'm still reasonably happy. I took time out last night to see a Fassbinder movie. I always wondered what it was, kind of a crazy film, but it was a good break. In other words, I haven't been working 24 hours a day on this book, although I have to really, concentrate. Now, yesterday I finished breakfast and I said, well, maybe I'll take a nap. And I knew that I should really write some more about asymptotics, and wasn't really enthused about it. Well, then I decided to get warmed up. I would go proofread some of the stuff that had already been written in the chapter, and actually the chapter started out rather well, I thought. So I was glad, and I looked at it, and so that encouraged me to go on. And then I had another idea on how to fix something, and so once I get over the threshold and get started on it, then I get interested in the subject, and enjoy the writing, and especially afterwards, after a tough problem has been solved, there's actually pleasure there. But on Sunday, I was so mad I was probably going to go out of my mind. I just couldn't find a way to make this exam. I mean, I had a perfect derivation of everything, except I needed one result that needed the theory of complex variables or Fourier series or something that wasn't in the book. and I didn't want to. I liked the book to be self-contained, and I struggled, and over again I tried to find proofs of this result. Probably impossible. So I finally had to flush it from my mind and get over that hang-up. But it did affect me. I mean, I was not a very lovable person on Sunday afternoon. Finally, I wrote a letter to Ron Graham, who's co-author, and said, Ron, see if you can find it. And otherwise, I'll just quote it as something, that it can be proved that, or it's something that beyond the scope of the book, but also happens to be true. It would be nice to have the whole book self-contained, but it might be impossible. Maybe this is a result Euler didn't know, and I don't go any past the mathematics Euler knew. Anyway, this is. But I'm trying to give you some of the feeling that I have about as I'm writing the book of sometimes wake in the morning with an idea that says that I just say, oh yeah, this is going to be perfect for the thing, and other days I say, well, I've got to do this book today, or else, and so I do it, and I get started as a duty. Generally, once I get started, that's the hard part. Now, you've got one more week, right, to do your. Speaking of cranking out pages per day and so on, next Wednesday is the day we'd like you to turn in as much as you have of the term paper, and the more the better, because I have two professionals who will actually be reading it and making feedback on it. One is Mary Claire, and one is Rosalie Stemmer, who will be lecturing also on what she sees in your drafts, and so you take advantage of this golden opportunity to get special expertise for feedback. And the rest of today, I want to talk about one of my battles with professional feedback. The outcome. I'm certainly the first to admit that I don't know everything about writing, but it's also reassuring, I suppose, to know that the people who do it full time for a living don't know everything either. Paul? No? You just raised your hand. No? Yes, you did. Hey, raise your hand. Okay, and so let me give you try to give you the experience. So here's the beginning of the correspondence. It's 1975. From the editor of Scientific American, a man who accomplishes an awful lot, and so he's inviting me to write an article, and he says he'd like it to be 6,000 words long. If you're inclined to proceed, we'd like to have it by October 1, and our customary payment for the article is $500. What does that come to per word? Is that 12 cents a word? That's, wait, no. Which do you divide by? Well, how do you do this? Okay, $500 divided by 6,000 words. So it's the other way around, isn't it? So it's, what? 8.3 cents a word? Okay, so each and counts 8.3 cents in the bank. Well, actually, I should mention that after the article was published, they put it in their reprint series, which they give especially to high school students, and they give royalties to the authors in this reprint series. I get a half a penny for every reprint of this article that they sell, and amazingly enough, I've been getting $5 or $10 a year for the last 10 years from this, which means $10. That's 2,000 reprints or something like that. So they're using this. It's a big money earner. I also got a royalty from the Russians of 1 kopek for every copy of The Art of Computer Programming that they published, and that amounted to, but that was 200,000 copies, and so that amounted to 2,000 rubles, which I didn't know how to spend. But I mean, it was nice that they would give me 1 kopek forever. Now, So you see, there's money associated with writing, and Jeff Ullman says he's going to talk a little bit more about that next week in part of his talk. But he wants to talk most of the time about the something about rising above minutiae and above details that can be distracting to abstract algorithms that try to or abstract examples. I mean, that try to illustrate a point without taking the attention away from the main point. So let's see. So that was the invitation, and then I must have written back and asked some questions about about illustrations, and then so he gives me his idea as to what algorithms mean. He doesn't know what they mean and so on, but he says that they have 600,000 readers, and so you should try to address, know your audience is one of the things. So he's telling me this, and he says he wants to get it by October 1. On September 29th, which is shortly before October 1, he reconsiders and relents for December. I don't remember being ill that summer, but I must have been. And so on December 15th, I did get it to him, and so he tells me he's got the article, and so on. It will take us a little while to give it the undistracted attention it deserves. Read between the lines. We got to check it out and see if we're at all interested. So then January 9th, it says that essentially that it's accepted for publication, and they are. But they like to have a balance among the sciences, and so they delay the publication. And so this is a form letter that says, don't call us, we'll call you, but we will call you sometime, indeed. And they already paid me for it, so I cashed in right there. And so as far as they're concerned, they would probably be glad never to hear from me again. Okay, now let's see. February 9th, 1977 was when I next heard. That was a year later. This it's worth quoting from the beginning of his letter. Let me emphasize that you may correct or further rework this copy totally as you see fit. As you know, we have undertaken to make the article slightly easier for the general reader to get into and to follow. But in the process, we may very well have inadvertently introduced errors of fact or emphasis. We take it for granted that you will want to repair such errors. Above all, let me stress that we do not prefer our prose to yours, nor are we trying to impose any style of our own. As I've indicated, our proposals have more to do with level of discourse. If anything strikes you as being uncharacteristic of your normal mode of address, please do not hesitate to change it. Okay, well, and then in 2 weeks they would like to hear, and so on. So, this is of course, a form letter too, but so it goes out to everybody, but it gave me certainly the liberty to not to hesitate to change things. Now, I guess I should resume this. I should go before I get into this part of the story with what went on before that. So I started out. Let's see. Do I have my handwritten draft? I guess not. But I did. I guess this was Phyllis typed the first draft here, and then I made edits to that, and I got a note here on her typed manuscript that she saved called "So Beautiful I Could Cry." I was telling her that she did great typing on this thing, and now here's the note to the editors that I wrote on the draft. I said, I've tried to imitate Scientific American style in this draft. Thus the figures which appear right there. I use a wicked which. The figures that appear at the end of the manuscript are accompanied by longish captions which that give the message of the article in capsule form. When the text refers to a figure, I've left a box like so-and-so, meaning point to figure 3, using a phrase like at the top of the opposite page, which is what they do in their style. They don't have figure. Right? Of course, I know that my writing style is only a curious approximation to yours, so it will be fun to see what you do to this, my masterpiece. All right. So that was what I had sent them. And okay, and then I got back the edited galley, as we said, in February of '77. Okay, where are we? I'll give you some of the bottom line here next. After I've got 3 letters that I wrote on February 17th, and one of them is to Martin Gardner, who, as I think you know, was a monthly columnist for the Scientific American for about 25 years and retired a few years ago. So he's a good friend. And so I said, Dear Martin, on Monday I received the typewritten manuscript of an article about algorithms I wrote for Scientific American. I was somewhat shocked by what seems to me a very poor editing job. I don't want to cause any hard feelings by complaining to Dennis Flanagan, whose correspondence has always been very cordial and efficient, nor do I want to waste any of your valuable time, but since I have frequently felt like screaming at many of the preposterous things that were done, I must vent my feelings somehow by writing them down. Okay, I realize that my own style is far from ideal. I intentionally break a lot of time-honored rules. For example, starting sentences with but when I wish to make a strong point. I tie long sentences like this one together with semicolons when I really should break them up, as newspaper reporters do. But I was astonished to see how many editorial changes were made that took perfectly good English and turned it into something that would be worth no more than B- on a high school term paper. Now, here I used that instead of which. It was pretty good there. Example, I wrote most common words. This was changed to commonest words. The term not only grates on my eardrums, it also fails to appear in my dictionary. Example, I wrote, when we study how to use computers properly, problems arise which, are interesting in their own right. Of course, I should have written that, and so naturally anybody who reads this sentence and has been trained knows that it was written by a poor writer, so it has to be rewritten. But here's what came out. In the study of how to properly employ computers, problems that are interesting in their own right arise. Now, that was a professional. Okay, so not only is the infinitive split, to properly employ computers. I mean, split infinitives aren't always wrong, but you don't have to go out of your way to split them. But the whole rhythm of the sentence went away. Okay, example, I wrote, note that we are speaking here about algorithms whose sole purpose is to determine the best search tree. Edited version. I should point out that here I have been discussing several algorithms, the sole purpose of which is to determine the best search tree. Stilted and awkward. What? Now, what do you...
We were just commenting on that
Yeah.
wasn't as bad as the other ones.
It wasn't as bad. Yeah, push the... Yeah. Yeah, push the button when you say...
We didn't think that was quite as bad as the other ones.
No,
but
the other one was a real...
It's still worse than what you had originally written.
Okay. A comma would help, yeah. But the rhythm was just, I thought it sounded like engineerese for sure. So now here it turned out that what I didn't know when I submitted the article that Scientific American doesn't ever talk about we in the way that I was accustomed to doing. I hadn't noticed that little detail of this. So the editor had to really change it to I here, but it's very awkward. Other problems: the repetition of the same unusual words in several adjacent sentences when synonyms could just as well have been used. Use of the same phrase to introduce 2 consecutive sentences or paragraphs, and so on. But one more example should suffice to convey the great skill of this particular editor. That is a very large number, approximately equal to grunt, pi being the familiar 3.1459. The most basic law of mathematical writing is to put words, not just a comma, between independent formulas. Again, the sentence doesn't flow. Well, so you can see why my original version was altered in 2 of the above examples. I'm going to talk about above later on sometime. that's controversial if I should say the examples above or the above examples. We don't ever say the below examples, but we say none of the above. Yeah. So it would have been better to say two of the examples above. But I'm, another glitch in my style I didn't know about at the time. I failed to realize the Scientific American doesn't like to talk about we. Okay, I can adjust to that restriction. Well, it means a lot of passive voice and stuffy sentences that one can verify. The resulting prose doesn't have to be so involute and contorted as the draft I received. And I tell about my personal opinion, which you all know very well. It was hard for me to change the manuscript back into something I would want my name to be attached to. On the other hand, I suppose that this particular copy editor also thinks that my style is awkward, opaque, and preposterous. All I know is I don't feel like rewriting your columns when I see them, but I felt like changing about every sentence of this manuscript. Something must be different about the two. So please don't bother to reply. I had just had to explode a little bit and explain my feelings to someone other than my wife and my secretary. I feel better now. All right. No. What? Oh, I've stayed in his house a few times and so on. Okay. Yeah. We're. Dear Mr. Flanagan, here's an edited, the same day, of course. Here's an edited version of the edited version of my article. I followed your advice and changed what I did not find characteristic of my normal mode of address, even though this meant a rather extensive list of changes. I have carefully, I'm embarrassed to show you this, carefully considered the use of this versus which, and other grammatical things, which or that, are sometimes in dispute. I also broke the rule about putting commas and periods inside of quotation marks in some places, since that rule does not apply when the quoted thing is a sequence of letters or symbols being referred to in a technical manner as that precise sequence. Then when three dots appear, they should be raised, and so on. I talk about that. Note that the latter period is outside the quotes because I'm speaking about a sequence of symbols one writes. Okay. When referring to algorithm A, B, etc. in steps A1, I've deleted all italic markings since it's customary in computer science to use Roman type in these contexts. I sincerely hope that I will have a chance to read galley proofs since so many changes were necessary, since there is so much technical material that is somewhat typographical in nature. I say I'm grateful that your copy editor found a misprint in one of my formulas that I would not otherwise have caught, and I'm also glad that many things I glossed over too hastily are now stated clearly. On the other hand, I'm sorry that I found it necessary to disagree with his or her prose style in so many places. All I can say is I've tried diligently to make the finished product satisfy my ear. Above all, please do not use the non-word communist in the article. Well, now, then I had another letter the same day to Flanagan, which is about the captions and illustrations, which is another issue. And and the question was how to make the illustrations work out. And they decided that it would be interesting to use first names. And so they made up an example. And when oh wait a minute, I guess they used what is this, Zelda? It wasn't too hard to decipher the method by which first names in Figure 1 were determined once I noticed Zelda, because on the masthead of the article, it mentions a Zelda, so I knew that there was a Zelda on his staff, and then I conjecture that your secretary's name is Adele and that her office is between yours and the publisher's. There was a list of names in which there was Dennis Adele Gerard apparently, and so on. So this was so the people there at the staff had made the use, and then I was saying maybe we should use surnames, and I talked about the article in Mad Magazine where the editors there had put their names into my article too. But as I was writing this letter, I changed my mind, decided the best list of surnames is obvious after all: Washington, Adams, Jefferson, Madison, and so on in this order. And so then it made a reasonable example for the sorting algorithm and so on. Okay, now, so several things were going on in parallel there. And I got to show you now the article and what the copy editor, some of the things the copy editor did and so on. So I got to get my tables here ready in parallel. First of all, well, I guess I'd better, I better go through the correspondence while we're in the correspondence. So here it says March 7th, 2 weeks later, enclose a proof of your article, together with separate copies of illustrations. You may be mildly interested to know that this is quite unprecedented in our scheme of things. Working as we do with a large manufacturing printer, We must deal with proofs on a 48-hour cycle. This, of course, leaves no time for the intercession of the author. Normally, we do all the necessary buffing and polishing at an earlier stage. In this case, it's clear the nature of the material calls for the closest scrutiny of all concerned, particularly yourself, and so on. So they did something that they never do, and they didn't even have Federal Express mail in those days. So they're working with Donnelly, the biggest printer in the United States. Donnelly is located in Chicago, and they send him their stuff from New York. And Donnelly prints most of the magazines of the country. It certainly did at that time, and still does most of them, I think. So I got these galley proofs to look at. So let me line those up. But then he says, now, as you will see in the proof, you and we are disagreeing about two matters of English. One is the proper use of which and that. In this we follow Fowler, and since there is a distinction in the meaning of the two words, we feel it should not be obliterated by using which interchangeably with that. Absolutely correct. And the second matter concerns commonist. It happens that there is currently a minor epidemic of putting perfectly good comparative and superlative forms aside in favor of using more and most. Almost every day I see more severe for severer. Just the other day I saw in the Times most stuffy. No, that one, most stuffy I can see, but severer, I'm not sure. Dictionary gives the comparative and superlative forms of common as commoner and commonest, so he has a different dictionary. He found a dictionary that has it. It said that J. Edgar Hoover used to pronounce communist as commonest, but surely we do not have to worry about that ambiguity. In other words, we would prefer to stick with the traditional usage, and so we've gone along with you and about the quotes and things like that. We greatly appreciate the pains you took in going through the edited copy and so on. And anyway, he says that. Well, his words are somewhat true there. Okay, so I have to say, and I'll show you the letter that Martin wrote to me too. I'm glad you wrote to me about those difficulties, and I'd like to reply even though you suggested I needn't. Problem has come up before with articles by top mathematicians. I find it hard to understand why. I work entirely at home, have little contact with the editors except once a month when I usually go in for a luncheon. The entire editorial staff has at the Harvard Club. I knew that your piece had been accepted, that Dennis liked it very much, but I have no notion at the moment of who was assigned to it. I'll try to find out discreetly at the next luncheon. I know that Stan Ulam, who died a couple of years ago, but he was extremely unhappy about the editing of the last article he wrote for Essay. From what you quote, I would certainly agree with your feelings, and I wish you would write Dennis a letter. I considered passing it on to him, but after thinking about it, I prefer not because he didn't want to have strained relations. I should, he says, needless to say, I wouldn't want Dennis to see a copy of this letter. Let's hide this whole thing. He goes on, and it's rather. And then he goes on and tells me some mathematical news and so on. And I wrote him a note saying, I decided to forget about my unhappiness with the writing style of that particular essay editor. I decided that the editors have so much to do in so little time, there's no chance for them really to polish things up. Mathematics, computer science articles are sufficiently unusual as to constitute a real headache anyway. I spent 1.5 pleasant hours working with this particular editor by phone on the revisions to the galley proofs. I'm pleased with the way everything has turned out. If I hadn't been so tired when the original manuscript came in, it arrived on top of 3 other crises, I would never have been upset anyway. I would just have written the incident off like I have on a half dozen other times I've confronted the media. It takes a rare talent like Gina Barry Collada's to do this kind of writing. She's one of the best writers about mathematics, so I shouldn't be upset when everybody doesn't have it. So that's sort of the conclusion of the correspondence part of this. I don't have to go back to that. Now, let's see. So I got the article and I got the copy editing, and then I got the page proofs, and then I can show you the final article, because somehow we have to look through this thing the way, in order to understand this, you have to collate a whole bunch of different stuff that goes into this writing. Okay, so I've got here's what I wrote and sent them, and then the last thing I have to. Okay. came out here. Actually, it has also another illustration that wasn't in my original manuscript here. I got advertisements are also sprinkled. Of course, magazines are supposed to sell things, and so I imagine they didn't had one of their rare computer ads in those days. But so it did come out, so in case we have to look at what actually came out in the real world, I have to go to that. Okay, so now what's next here? All right. The beginning of the article was completely rewritten, and I should say the beginning, as I said, is the most important part, and that's where you want to get the reader hooked. And here was the great great advantage, of course, that the copy editor doesn't know computer science, and so can see exactly where I'm using jargon, where I'm blind to these things. And so my first paragraph was not at all great. 10 years ago, it would not have been unusual for a scientist to think that the word algorithm was simply a careless typist rendition of the word logarithm. The rapid rise of computer science, which has the study of algorithms as its main focal point, has now changed the situation. Algorithm increasingly appears in people's vocabularies. I mean, right now, I even overhear people using it in buses, but this wasn't true in 1977. Perhaps in another 10 years, newspaper reporters will even be able to assume that their readers know what an algorithm is. I think that happened in 10 years. Yeah. Well, so anyway, our language has several words that almost describe the concept: procedure, recipe, process, routine, and so on. This was mine, yeah. So now let's see what happened, what came out. Okay, so 10 years ago, the word algorithm was unknown to most educated people. Indeed, it was scarcely necessary. And first of all, she doesn't want to say scientist because the Scientific American goes to educated people, of course, and so on. The rapid rise of computer science has changed all that. The word is now essential. There are several other words that almost but not quite capture the concept. This is her correction. Capture the concept of an algorithm, procedure, and so on, method. She left out the word rigmarole, which I thought was reasonable, but and an algorithm is a set of rules. So now notice that these sentences are all short, and that was better than mine, where my sentences tended to be quite rather long and so on. And so it got in there, but I still wanted to put in the a plug for algorithms as being a main part of computer science, as perhaps one of the more important unifying principles, because I wanted people to realize this. And in general, there are many of the things in my article that got greatly improved by means of this rewrite, especially taking out the jargon and then slowing things down where I was going too fast at a bad pace. So the fact is then that having the rewrite was a great advantage for the final quality of the product. On the other hand, a rewrite of the rewrite, which is what I said to my letter to Dennis, was much better, was sort of 2 orders of magnitude better than the original. And I was able to get rid of all the glitches that came out. Now let's see. But let's go into. I don't understand why the copy editor would change. I had written "can fruitfully be studied," and she changed it to "can be fruitfully studied." And I have no idea, so I put it back again. Okay, now let's see. But I should get more into things that are general than too specific. And so here was one of the cases where the jargon had to be changed, and so we can take a look at this now. So this is you can, by the way, typographically, you can tell when I'm showing you something that came out of Scientific American. It was it was written with this funny word processor. This 1977 that tries to estimate the way the breaks are going to, the amount of copy that you have, so that they can figure out how many column inches they have for the magazine. Well, let's see. So I had said during this algorithm, J will take the values n minus 1 ... until either reaching 0 or a location containing the input word x. And she changed it, saying in the execution of the algorithm, J will sequentially take the values n minus 1, n minus 2, and so on until reaching either 0 or a location. And so this ... was, was not good here. We wanted to have this and so on. So I didn't like the way that came out, but it wasn't too hard to. Subsequent steps will cause J to run through the sequence of values n minus 1, and so on. Then it made sense to me. I put a comma here. I don't know if that one survived, but that's not too important. Previous page, I had said, this is about the I versus we. Although numerical methods have many features of interest, we shall concern ourselves in this article with examples of non-numerical algorithms in order to emphasize the fact that algorithms deal primarily with the manipulation of symbols that need not represent numbers. Now, I wasn't using we, it sounded like I was using we in the formal sense because I'm talking about in this article. Somehow, if we're really using we as you and me, we would say in this discussion or something like this. But the word article is wasn't the perfect use of we in my ideal sense. And naturally, though, this whole article was rewritten in first person with I, and so it said, let's see, although numerical algorithms have many interesting features, I shall confine this discussion to non-numerical algorithms in order to emphasize the fact that algorithms deal primarily with the symbols and so on. Now, I guess so I switched over to I. It's okay. I had on the final one, but I crossed out present here too. I couldn't. This discussion, I wanted to say the following discussion to non-numerical ones. I didn't want to say algorithms. All the time it was too many times in a row, I guess. But the main thing here is that she changed it to something where it's me talking, and that was okay. But I didn't want to emphasize myself all the way through. So a lot of the other stuff had to be changed into passive voice. Let's see, where are we here? Okay, algorithm A, sequential search we already talked about. Here's something. What is this? What do I have this flagged here? You see they had a great big space between K and the subscript there, and no space around the equal sign. And this is typical when you try to put mathematics into a typesetting system that isn't accustomed to it. And the term key J means that the word is stored at location J, and I had to change that around, but I'm not sure exactly why I flagged this one. That's not that important, I guess. Let's see. Here, I was talking about a trick of giving some meaning to key 0. So here I had to rewrite quite a bit because she had asked a question, and so in order to explain the question, it was better to say in words what more was going on. Okay, so anyway, but the main thing here is that I had written in my original manuscript, I had just said unfortunately, and then I didn't say anything else. I just said unfortunately. Where is my manuscript here? Here I said unfortunately, the most commonly used computer programming languages, Standard, Fortran, and COBOL, don't allow 0 as an index. So this improvement couldn't be made easily in such languages. So now what actually came out, she started out first and says, unfortunately for programmers, the most commonly used, the commonly used? I don't know. The most commonly used computer languages, programming languages do not allow 0. And so, yeah, that was reasonable. When you start out with something, unfortunately, it seems very clear to you that it's unfortunate, but it doesn't seem clear to the rest of the world, to what subclass of people it's unfortunate. So, although still a little bit awkward, it was necessary to say that. I now realize. Okay, so. Okay, so that happened there. Let's see now. Now here was one that got really clobbered. If n were as large as 1,000,000, this would be a very bad way to search the table. I'm talking about sequential search. We must be searching such a large table frequently, otherwise we wouldn't have gone to the expense of building it. So we had better not waste time during the search. What did she change? If n were as large as 1,000,000, a simple sequential search would be a very poor way to look through the table. And if we needed to write an algorithm to search through such a large table, we would have to have some reason to be searching the table frequently. Otherwise, we would not have gone to the expense of compiling it. Therefore, it is best not, and so on. So okay. Now, I put we back in there somehow. Let's see what actually came out of the what actually came out. Let's see. Yeah, the we got to survive anyway. Yeah. Okay. So in the article, but it does, the sentence that actually, the paragraph actually came out to be reasonably well then. A simple sequential search would usually be an unbearably slow way to go through. We would hardly go to the expense of building such a large table unless we expected to search it frequently, and we would not want to waste any time during the search. So in something like that, we can do better than that. The word we was allowed to survive in that case here. 1642 East 56th Street. I have a feeling that's Scientific American's offices. I don't know. Is that? I don't know. Well, a lot of the things I did were just simple, like here it says search, and the next sentence says searching again. Just change it to another word, looking. It reads more interesting way. Let's see now. On the other hand, when one is looking up someone's name, I'm just having to make, this is just going back to present tense instead of active voice instead of passive voice. What must be done in the event of an unsuccess? Okay. I think I better skip to something that's more highlight here. So now here was another case where something I wrote had to be quite expanded. I said this algorithm uses and assumes also that key 1 less than or equal key 2 less than or equal 3 dots less than or equal key n. So here this got rewritten into a long explanation. Moreover, it is assumed that the word stored at location 1, key 1, is less than or equal to the word stored at location 2, key 2. She had capital L there, it didn't sound right. Which is less than or equal to the word stored at location 3, key 3, and so on, all the way up to the word stored in location n, key n. And so this condition can be written, and then she gives the formula here, throwing in an extra key 3 that wasn't present. Now, when now let's look at the page proofs. It came in. Unfortunately, just because she had this extra one, it didn't fit in a line. But there's a very strange break, and so we had to. Now at this point it was too late to make any changes that would affect the number of lines in the article. So it had to be transposed downward. But what did they actually? They actually got it to look reasonable somehow, except that they changed it to less than signs instead of less than or equal signs. Whoops, I didn't catch that. Oops. Oh well, there it is. I found out that.
600,000 people have been confused ever since.
Wow, my goodness, 600,000. Oh gosh, that's terrible. Now, when I found out when I talked to her on the telephone is that the editors in New York City have to write the captions for these and figure them out so that the last line of every caption is flush right. And they actually calculate, they count letters and the length of letters and they in New York, and then phone this to Chicago, and then and take what they like here was a case where they had problem in this line here, but each line break is hand determined at this time. This was 1977, and these people have a 2-day deadline. I mean, they're spending all their time doing crazy stuff like that. No wonder she couldn't polish my article any better than she had to. And so anyway, I could solve this one by just taking out some words of that line, but every single caption was made to fit like this. And then they had this neat algorithm for doing it, and that is that they remove the word "the" starting at the end of the caption and going back to the beginning as far as they need it. You look at the which is left boundary of search, meaning that Gibbs is not in table. You see what I mean? If you go to the end of captions in Scientific American, the word "the" tends to disappear with the monotone increase in frequency. I think this is wonderful. Okay. Okay. Now let's see. Okay. Here's an example of something that is typical also of refereeing, and they wanted more information. So I had written in original, I had said, in fact, Y. Pearl and A. Itai of, and then she says, what institution have recently shown that something or other? And then meanwhile, a better theorem had been proved by Andy and Francis Yao before they came to Stanford, and so I changed that, and I could put the institutions in here, but this was one of the things that they encouraged me to supply information as to the place where these people live here. Now I just want to show you this, that although in the first paragraph she changed my sentences to nice and short ones. Here's one that says, on the other hand, for searches executed by computer experience, she never likes comma. Searches executed by computer experience has shown that an interpolation search is usually not an improvement over a binary search, both because accessibility to the memory of a computer is typically not random enough, and because the extra calculation per comparison required by the interpolation takes more time than the amount of time that is saved by reducing the number of comparisons. Now, my original sentence was I think that was originally two or three sentences of mine, and so I broke them back up again into something else. Another split infinitive. Here's where the punctuation was relevant for the 31 commonest English words here, talking about the words a, and so on. This is my comma here, but she puts the comma inside the quotes, which is the rule that you would find in the grammar in the English books, but not when you're referring to it as a word that's going to be stored in the table. So I guess we all know that. That's where that came from. Here's a sentence that said, in that way, the address of the word the would be. Now, if this had been in a caption, well, it'd be, it says, a lot of times, it was like here she said, thus the collision is avoided. This was technically incorrect. Thus the search will be carried out properly even when collisions occur, is the correct way to say it. But it was clear to me that when she made that error, that other people would too. So I needed to, as again, whenever a referee gives you a comment that's wrong, it still means that there was a defect in the original of some sort. Okay. Here she asked me, like a referee would do. Yeah, I know we're running out of time. But we had this long formula, and then she says, which is approximately equal to what simple equation? And so she asked me to supply some mathematics here. So it was a job that was well done in the sense of also asking for further information that she expected the author could supply, even, and I'll continue the story on Friday.